This is interesting stuff. From women's rights to feminist wrongs, contempt for men in contemporary society. Well, it sounds good, but it's not my phrase, you see. It's the title of a conference at which the great Barbara Kay is delighting the audience. Is it true?
Well, I think there is a great deal of contempt for men in our society, and I don't mean it in a kind of touchy-feely way, like as if I sense it. I'm talking about in our institutions. I've really had a good look over the years at our educational, legal, social service, health, and family court. Worst of all, bias against men is pandemic in our society.
Well, I mean, certainly when it comes to messy divorces and custody disputes, it's quite clear that even a model father will not get custody if a woman simply wants the children, at least 99% of the time.
Not 99%, but 90%, which is pretty high.
Right, 9% wrong.
Well, 10% of family of custody of divorces with children are contested. 10% of all cases. Most people do settle, and many of them very amicably. They make their own arrangements. More power to them. But in the 10% that are contested, and that's still many thousands, 90% of them will go to the mother for sole custody, and that doesn't mean the other 10% go to men, by the way. Sometimes the CAS takes them, or other family members, or whatever. So men get about 6%.
Right. So I was 4% out. It's getting better as the show goes on. You mentioned health, and I know that some men's groups, for example, have said, look, breast cancer gets this amount of funding and this amount of care, but prostate cancer is really minimized. But is that a fair comparison?
That's not the health issue I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you a little-known fact about our health system. Certainly in Ontario, there are at least 25 health units, hospitals, clinics, and whatever. They have a policy. It's called Best Practices, put in by the registered nurses of Ontario. All 186,000 of them approved this. If a 12-year-old girl comes into a hospital for any reason whatsoever, a broken wrist, a tooth knocked out, whatever, she goes through a protocol, and she's asked if she's been subject to sex abuse now or in the past, so that they can, you know, intervene.
Of any age?
Well, children, I mean, we're talking about 12-year-olds and up, women. They call them women, but at 12, a girl is still a child, especially by Child Services calls them children up to the age of 16. So from 12 on, they get these queries, and to elicit, just in case, and if that is the case, then they can then look into it, and she'll have therapy or whatever is necessary to deal with her case. But not boys. So I'm wondering, is that because 12-year-old boys have never had sex abuse in the past, or in the present, or may in the future? And I did ask the head of the registered nurses. I wrote a column about a few years ago, and I said, what's this about? I mean, why wouldn't you do both? You know, well, we really don't know a lot about boys and how they react to sexual abuse. She didn't deny that it happens to boys, and under the age of 12, by the way, it's almost equal. You know, boys and girls, when they're quite young, are almost equally abused. And she had no reason. And she says, we really don't know a lot. So I Googled around, and within 2 seconds, I found several studies that had been done. There's absolutely no reason why public monies, if they're being spent on girls, shouldn't be spent. Now we have them coming out with elder abuse.
I've seen the ads on TV.
Okay, so a friend of mine who's very interested in this questioned them and said, I see, so when older women come in, you're going to be questioning them if they're being abused by their children or their, you know. Yes, we are. And what about older men? Will you also be questioning them? And suddenly he said, evasion hit the air. Yes, and so I'm not accusing them, because I have not personally spoken to anybody on this, but it would not surprise me if all the attention will be on older women. Nothing wrong with helping older women if they need it, but hello, you know.
And Alzheimer's dementia, I mean, it doesn't discriminate between gender. You're completely vulnerable, whatever you're... Now, this is harder to quantify, I suppose, but media, there does seem to be, I don't think it's just anecdotal, this constant mocking and marginalizing of men as fathers, men as husbands. It can be in a gentle, quite funny way, like Modern Family. I don't think that's harmful, but it can be quite sinister as well.
I think it can be. I think that if you look culturally at, if you added up all the commercials, the sitcoms, the movies, you see trends. One of the trends is to laugh at men's incompetence or their thick-headedness or their density or their inability to parent without tutoring from the mother. The mothers always look kind of smart. They're kind of always rolling their eyes at the, you know, the idiocy of men. One of the film reviewer, Chris Knight, at the Post, was talking about the Oscar-winning, or those in contention for an Oscar, the films, and he mentioned some that were dad-friendly this year, because Moneyball, Hugo, there's a bunch of movies that have dads central to the plot. And he said, well, that's good news. He says, funny thing, though, in all these movies where the dads are great, he said the mom is either comatose, dead, you know, abandoned, sick, something. She's not in the picture. And I felt like writing to him and saying, Chris, you've discovered the Hollywood rule. If there are two parents in the picture, the mom will shine. It might be that they both do, but the mom will certainly shine. The dad is only allowed to be terrific when there's no mom in the picture. And even then, he's portrayed as a kind of coping figure. He's learning how to parent. Remember Kramer versus Kramer in 1979? That was sort of, well, that sort of set the tone for it. And so that is a very interesting cultural kind of trend.
This story in Kitchener with the 4-year-old who drew the gun, I mean, it's interesting that the whole thing is vile and repugnant, but of course it was the father who was strip-searched and humiliated and arrested.
I asked my colleagues the question. We were having a little forum discussion about it. I said, tell me, if the girl had drawn a picture of a mommy with a knife, and the knife, even if it was pointed in her direction, would the teacher even have twigged to that as an idea that she could possibly imagine that? I mean, in this particular case, the father was a protector. Oh, my daddy kills monsters. Not as a figure of would they have come to the school and picked her up?
I doubt it very much, although we're now, apparently, we're finding out that monsters was a euphemism for social worker. No. As always, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Love to be here.